Finance ministers of the world's largest economies met in India's southern city of Bengaluru. However, the G20 meeting hosted by India ended without any consensus on the Ukraine-Russia war, with China and Russia declining to sign a joint statement condemning Russia for its war in Ukraine. To talk on more about this and India's stance in the ongoing war as it enters its second year, we're now being joined by former Indian diplomat Ashok Sajanhar, who has been the ambassador of India to Sweden, Latvia, and has also worked in diplomatic positions in Washington, D.C., Brussels, and even Moscow. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, the G20 was formed nearly 20 years ago to majorly tackle economic crisis. Do you think that the forum is now getting politicized with issues like the Ukraine war being discussed?
Well, the forum has been politicized for quite some time because, yes, you're right, it came up in 1997-98, after the ASEAN currency crisis. That was at the level of finance ministers and governors of central banks. And then it was upgraded to the summit level in 2008, after the 2007-2008, this global financial crisis. So over the last 15 years, the remit of the G20 has been expanding, and it has been taking on issues which are not strictly economic in nature, climate change, even terrorism and others. But of course, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has completely polarized the whole world, that of course presents different sets of challenges to the G20 and to the different countries who are participating in it.
Right. Talking about the Russia-Ukraine war itself, I want to ask you and seek your perspective as to how do you assess India's position on the Ukraine-Russia war. New Delhi has maintained a neutral stance so far. It even abstained from the UNGA vote on a Ukraine peace resolution, which took place just 2 days ago.
Yeah, I think India has taken a very balanced position, a very it has been able to articulate its position very well and very effectively. And it has also been able to protect its own national interest. While we have maintained the best of relations with the United States, with Europe, with the West and the other countries, and we've been sending support in terms of economic support, medicine and food items to Ukraine, as far as to deal with the challenges that their population is facing. But we've also maintained good relations with Russia, because Russia has been, and before that the Soviet Union, was a very significant supplier of arms and equipment to India. And we have been also importing oil from Russia to meet our energy security needs, because India is the per capita GDP is low, and we cannot really afford to import energy at very high, at $100 plus per barrel rates, because that will create havoc with our economy in terms of inflation and problems for our people. So I think India has taken a very balanced position on this, of which there has been, should I say, grudging acceptance, recognition and grudging acceptance even by the West, if not total resonance. And this was visible even during the visit of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to India yesterday, when meeting took place between him and Prime Minister Modi.
Right. Just to add to that, we absolutely agree with what you're saying, that even the EU envoy appreciated India's stance in the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war. But I also want to ask you that, do you think India's position has evolved over time since the war started?
Yes, I think it has subtly evolved, and it's been a very nuanced position. You would recall that right at the beginning, India had articulated that countries, the security needs of all countries need to be respected, and we need to be sensitive to that. That was in terms of Russia's security concerns. But once the war started, once the aggression took place on the 24th of February, India has been speaking about the importance of the UN Charter and maintaining the territorial integrity and sovereignty of countries. And this has been an underlying refrain in all the statements that India has made at the UN General Assembly or at the UN Security Council. And of course, initially our concern was also very significant in terms of getting our 22,000 nationals, particularly students, back from Ukraine. And in that context, we worked together with Russia, with Ukraine, and with the neighboring countries like Poland, like Hungary, like Czech Republic, like Romania, to get our students out of there safely. And over this period, our stance has evolved. We have spoken out in favor of diplomacy and dialogue, and that peace should be restored. And India has also stated that it is willing to help in any way that it can to bring this war to a closure.
Right, let's talk about China now. On one hand, China issues a 12-point peace plan to end the Ukraine-Russia war, while on the other, it declines to accept the G20 statement that deplored Russia's aggression. So what exactly is China's largest strategy at the moment?
You know, number one, I don't think China is seen as an honest broker, because China is so very closely working together with Russia. You would recall that on the 4th of February last year, when Putin had visited Beijing for the Winter Olympics, there was a statement issued that there would be a no-limit partnership between the two countries.
Right.
And most recently, we have seen the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi going to Russia and saying that the relationship is rock solid. So I don't think that China's position as a mediator or as a harbinger of peace carries much weight or much credibility. I think China wants to project and enhance its international role, its influence, also create maybe some sort of fissures between Europe and the United States, also try to reach out to Europe. So I think it has more geopolitical interests when it presents this peace proposal. But, you know, when it doesn't speak about the future of the four regions that Russia declared to be a part of its own territory in September last year, then of course it has no possibility of any success whatsoever. And I'm not surprised that all the Western countries have totally rejected this so-called peace plan.
Right, absolutely. Just to add to what you said, that with China's top diplomat Wang Yi visiting Moscow, there are also reports that say that the Chinese President Xi Jinping might also visit Moscow and meet with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So I want to seek your inputs regarding, do you think that China has clearly taken a side in the ongoing war and its claim to neutrality has faded?
Yeah, I think it has been slowly and gradually moving towards the Russian position, because earlier you would recall that it would not violate any of the sanctions that were imposed by the West on Russia. So it didn't want to fall foul of the sanctions because it is too heavily invested itself in terms of its economic relations and partnership with the West, with Europe, with the United States. But I think as the time has gone by, and maybe as it sees that the impact of the sanctions on Russia is not as debilitating as it was initially thought to be, and that the Russian economy has come down only by about 2% or so, notwithstanding the sanctions. So I think it is feeling somewhat emboldened to identify itself more closely with Russia. And also there have been reports that China might be contemplating sending arms, equipment, ammunition to Russia, although it has been warned against this by the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, but these reports have also surfaced. So I think slowly and gradually it has been shifting and moving its position towards support for Russia.
Absolutely. Now, meanwhile, US President Joe Biden has called the Chinese peace plan biased and said that it would only work for Russia, while China and Russia and even India have abstained from the UNGA vote on Ukraine peace resolution. So it's been a year since the war started. I want to ask you, what exactly is the way out, and when will this war end?
Well, I think to respond to your second question, I don't think anyone knows, even if you were to ask people in the top echelons of leadership in Russia or even the United States, I don't think anyone would be able to give you any concrete specific answer. There are contacts between the Russian and the US leadership, and I think they will really have to decide when they want to call it quits as far as the conflict is concerned. But we've seen the State of the Nation address by President Putin a few days ago. We saw the visit, totally unprecedented, unannounced visit by President Joe Biden to Kiev, and where he said that the Western Alliance, NATO, and the United States are prepared to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. So I think both sides are determined. There are more weapons that are coming to Ukraine from the West, and there's news of a fresh offensive from Russia and more conscription and more recruitment by Russia. So I don't think we can really see any end to the conflict in the very near future. And also as to what does it behold for the coming weeks, I think more escalation as we have seen over the last few days, because there'll be more men and material on the Russian side, and there'll be more equipment coming to Ukraine. So I think at least for the foreseeable future, we are going to see more of escalation of fighting and conflict.
Right, my last question to you before I let you go, Ambassador. Do you think that discussions towards finding a common language in forums like G20, G7, or for that matter, even the United Nations regarding world's challenges are getting more difficult as the war goes on?
Yeah, let me put it this way. G7, I don't think there'll be any problem because, you know, there all the countries think the same way. G20, I know that you would recall that even in under Indonesia's presidency, there were lots of problems. And it's only on the 16th of November, when the summit took place, that by using Prime Minister Modi's language, which he had told President Putin that this is not an era of war, that we were really able to finalize and get agreement on the final declaration. But I think here going forward, we will have to, the challenges are becoming even greater. So India will have to use all its deft diplomacy, reach out to Russia, to the Russian leadership, reach out to the American leadership, and try to come on an agreed language and formulation which would permit the G20 discussions to go through and bring up some concrete results on the very many challenges of debt, of economic growth, of climate change that we have been discussing.
Right, absolutely, Ambassador. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.